bring on our last VIP speaker for the night. This is somebody who, again, I ran into because I was on a Zoom meeting. Thank goodness for Zoom, if you ask me. I have been trying for years now to keep up with the younger generations of voters, because we're really voting for them and their future, and whatever it is we leave behind, we're leaving for them. So it's really important to me that I understand those people and I help to give them a voice. The next young lady is Brianna Cea. She is the CEO and co-founder of an incredible, I don't want to call it a corporation, a business called Generation Votes. And she is here to talk about and to talk to not just the youngest voters, to all of us, but she certainly has a good handle on the younger generations. So Ms. Cea, take it away.
Hey everyone, can you hear me all right? And can you see me all right?
Yes.
Amazing. Yeah, thank God for Zoom. I can actually take this call up here in New York and to be with you all technically in Florida. So, I appreciate y'all inviting me. And thank you for that lovely introduction, Natalie. So a little bit more about Generation Vote. Again, my name is Brianna Cea, and Generation Vote is a youth-led organization committed to building a movement of young people to stop the youth voter suppression crisis, advance youth voting rights. Right now, we have chapters in New York and Florida who are doing this work, and transform the way young people engage in local politics. So again, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this rally and to, I guess, end it. So hopefully I get y'all motivated to get the young people that you know in your lives to vote and make a voting plan, in this upcoming election. And again, I want to highlight and talk about not only the importance of the youth vote, but as organizers, understanding that there is a much more nuanced narrative when it comes to understanding why young people vote and why they don't vote, right? So as Natalie mentioned earlier, and as y'all probably know, the hype around the youth vote is real, right? Especially after 2016. And throughout this year, I've been speaking with young people and voters in New York and Florida about not only the importance of the youth vote, but the challenges that young people like myself and like the Gen Vote students that I work with specifically face when trying to access our fundamental right to vote, especially in the past few years. And, in the lead up to the 2020 election, I think this is more relevant than ever because we're still fighting a narrative that paints young people as apathetic and not reliable. But like I said, in reality, it's much more nuanced than that. So to provide some sort of context, as many of you may know, in 2018, young voters really rocked the vote. We broke records in the last major election with about 31% of young voters showing up to the polls. These are folks under the age of 30. And in some states, actually turning out in greater numbers than the general electorate. But since 2018, local governments across the country have actively moved to restrict and suppress the youth vote. And this has brought to light a broader movement to silence the voices of people that look like me, even before the 2018 midterms. These efforts have disproportionately affected young voters of color, and many of the voter suppression tactics used against young voters are the very same tactics used to suppress the vote in Black and Brown communities. In some states like Florida, state governments even went so far to explicitly target young voters by attempting to ban polling sites on college campuses during the early voting period, claiming that it was inaccessible to the public, but in reality, went through litigation that challenged that law, it was shown that they were actively trying to suppress young voters because they were afraid of their power. So from Florida to New Hampshire to New York, where I live, to Texas, Wisconsin, we've seen young people be forced to jump over hurdles to exercise their right to vote. What does this look like? In some states, we can't find polling sites close to campuses, or at least in some jurisdictions within states. In some states, we can't use student ID cards or out-of-state driver licenses as valid IDs, but handgun licenses are okay. Even worse, when young people show up to the polls, sometimes they're harassed and told to go back to your home state by the election workers. And that has happened in states like Connecticut, right? Which not a lot of folks talk about when it comes to this fight for voting rights. And we already saw the effects of these efforts to suppress the youth vote in the 2020 primaries. Young people turned out, for example, to vote in a New Hampshire primary without knowing whether or not they'll be penalized for breaking the law. Students had to wait on 6-hour lines at a Texas campus because of the lack of accessible polling sites in their community. And in 7 states this year, you can only vote by mail if you're under the age of 65. So that affects everyone under the age of 65, not just young voters under the age of 30, right? And in my own home state of New York, thousands of young people were disenfranchised in our own primary elections, since almost 1/4 of our ballots were thrown out. And the reasons why they were thrown out disproportionately affected younger voters that were new to the mail-in voting process. So I share all these issues because young voters in Florida face very similar issues that all the other young people face in the states that I mentioned earlier. And so from coast to coast, Maine to Florida, the youth voter suppression crisis and the voter suppression crisis just generally is real. And we're only going to see more of it in the lead up to this presidential election and beyond. But despite all of these challenges to accessing the ballot and the challenge that y'all may have faced when trying to engage with young voters because of the pandemic, with like mass displacement and just confusion with all the recent changes in election laws, I do think that it's still super important for us to try our hardest to educate young voters, to help them overcome these barriers, and to try to see if we can break records in this upcoming election. Recent studies have shown in polls that our generation is more politically engaged and motivated than ever. We just need a little bit more help and support from local organizers like yourselves to help us, engage in this process, and for many folks, engage in this process for the first time and become lifelong voters like yourselves. So I'll end with, a hopeful note. After the 2020 census, which you all should fill out, by the way, our generation, young people, will be the most diverse generation that our country has ever seen. And so if we want those in office to reflect our generation, to reflect my future and our priorities, we need to mobilize young people, and we collectively need to vote like our lives depend on it, and vote for the right candidates that will protect our generation. So thank you again so much for having me. I hope I was able to shed light on some issues that young people are facing, and I'm more than happy to work with y'all moving forward. You can reach out to me directly at bcea@genvote.org. You can check us out at genvote.org. I'll drop it in the chat. And yeah, thanks for having me and for supporting young people. I appreciate it.
Yay,